I spent 30 years auditioning for my parents' affection, convinced my milestone birthday would finally be the night I earned it. Instead, they turned the ballroom into an execution site, as my mother raised the microphone to publicly announce I wasn't their biological child. She smiled like she was delivering a gift, not a verdict. She didn't notice the woman watching from the shadows, the only person in the crowd who knew exactly why they were lying. The venue was called the Obsidians, a restored industrial space in the heart of the city where the brick walls were exposed and the lighting was designed to make everyone look 10 years younger. I had spent 6 months planning this night, every napkin fold, every song on the playlist, and every appetizer on the passing trays had been vetted by me 3 times over. It was my 30th birthday, and I wanted it to be a fortress. For the last 29 years, my life had felt like a series of erratic drafts, messy and constantly subject to the red pen of my parents' criticism. But 30 felt different. 30 felt like a threshold. I had a job I was actually good at, a small but loyal circle of friends who knew who I was when I wasn't performing, and an apartment that finally felt like a home rather than a storage unit for my anxieties. This party was supposed to be the coronation of that stability. I wanted to stand in a room full of people I loved, hold a glass of champagne, and feel, for the first time, that I was standing on solid ground. I should have known that my parents do not believe in solid ground. They believe in trapdoors. I adjusted the strap of my emerald silk dress. Catching my reflection in the darkened glass of the patio doors, I looked composed. I looked like a woman who had it together, but my hands were trembling. My best friend, Sarah, slid up beside me and pressed a cold glass of white wine into my shaking hand. "You look stunning," she said. "Stop checking the door. They will be here when they get here, and if they are weird, I will spill red wine on your mother's beige cashmere. I have done it before. I will do it again," I laughed, but the sound was thin. They promised to be on their best behavior. Mom actually sounded excited on the phone. She asked about the floral arrangements. She never asks about flowers unless she is planning to criticize the florist. "Maybe they are turning a new leaf," Sarah said, though her tone suggested she believed in unicorns more than she believed in the redemption of Richard and Eleanor Ward. 30 is a big deal. Maybe they finally realized you are an adult, and they should treat you like one. "Maybe," I said, but the knot in my stomach was not loosening. It was tightening. A familiar cold coil that I had lived with since I was 5 years old. It was the feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop, only to realize my parents were the ones holding the shoe, waiting for the moment when the silence was loudest to let it fall. They arrived 20 minutes early. Usually, my parents were fashionably late, arriving just as the energy of a party was peaking so they could hijack the momentum. Tonight, the room was still filling up. The jazz trio was playing a soft, unobtrusive set, and the waiters were just beginning to circulate with the fig and prosciutto tartlets. The double doors swung open, and there they were. My father, Richard, looked remarkably energized. He was wearing his custom tuxedo, the one he usually reserved for board galas and charity balls, not a birthday party for his daughter in a converted warehouse. His silver hair was swept back, his posture aggressive and commanding. Beside him, my mother, Eleanor, was practically vibrating. She wore a gown that was slightly too formal for the occasion, a shimmering silver thing that caught the light aggressively. Her smile was plastered on, wide and bright, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were scanning the room like a predator scanning the horizon for movement. "Anna," my mother cried out, her voice projecting across the mostly empty dance floor. She rushed toward me, arms outstretched, a performance of maternal affection that made my skin prickle. I braced myself for the critique, the comment about my hair being too flat, or my dress being too low cut, or the venue being too drafty. "Happy birthday, darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek without actually touching her skin to mine. She pulled back and held me at arm's length, her grip on my shoulders surprisingly tight. "Look at you. You look adequate. The dress is a bold choice." "Thank you," I said. ignoring the backhanded nature of the compliment. "I am glad you guys made it early." "We wouldn't miss it," my father said, stepping up and clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. He wasn't looking at me, though. He was looking over my head, scanning the scattering of early guests. "Is the lighting going to stay this dim? It feels a bit like a crypt in here. We should have the manager bring it up. People need to see." "It is atmospheric, Dad," I said. "Please don't touch the lights." "Nonsense," he said, already waving a finger at a passing waiter. "And where is the seating chart? We need to make sure the right people are near the front for the speeches." "There is no seating chart," I said, feeling the first crack in my composure. "It is a cocktail party. People can stand where they want. And we don't need formal speeches, just a quick thank you." My mother laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound that sounded like glass breaking in a dishwasher. "Oh, Anna, always so modest. Of course we are going to have speeches. We have prepared something special, a tribute." "A tribute?" I asked. The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. My parents did not do tributes. They did lectures. They did public corrections. "Trust us," my mother said, her eyes finally locking onto mine with an intensity that made me want to step back. "It is going to be a night to remember. We have invited a few people to ensure it is properly witnessed." "Witnessed?" I asked. "Who did you invite?" "Just old friends," my father said vaguely. He turned away, dismissing me. "Ah, there he is. Arthur. Over here." I followed his gaze. Walking through the entrance was a man I hadn't seen in 15 years. Arthur Galloway. He was a business rival of my father's from decades ago. A man my father had spent my entire childhood complaining about. They hated each other, or so I thought. Yet here was Arthur, looking uncomfortable in a gray suit, being ushered into the room by my father with the enthusiasm of a reunion. "Why is Arthur Galloway here?" I whispered to my mother. She was busy typing furiously on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. She didn't look up. "He is an old associate. It is polite to include the community. Stand up straight. Anna, you are slouching." I straightened my spine instinctively, the muscle memory of obedience kicking in before I could stop it. As the hour passed, the room filled. My friends arrived loud, happy, normal people who hugged me and handed me silly cards and ordered drinks at the bar. The music picked up. The chatter grew to a comfortable roar. For a few minutes, I almost relaxed. I was talking to Mike, a colleague from my marketing firm, laughing about a client meeting gone wrong. When I felt the shift in the room, my parents were circulating, but they weren't mingling. They were herding. I watched from the corner of my eye as my father placed a hand on the back of a prominent local judge, guiding him subtly toward the center of the room, near the small stage where the microphone stand waited. My mother was doing the same with a couple who sat on the board of the city's largest philanthropic trust. They were positioning people. It looked like a game of chess where the guests were pawns being arranged for a specific attack strategy. "Your parents are intense tonight," Sarah whispered, appearing at my elbow again. "Your dad just asked me how much money I make. Like, straight up, no hello. Just, what is your annual compensation, Sarah?" "I am sorry," I said, rubbing my temples. "I don't know what they are doing. They are acting like they are launching a product, not celebrating a birthday." "And who is the guy in the velvet jacket?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the bar. "He looks like he walked out of a Dickens novel." I looked. It was another stranger, a man in his 60s, holding a glass of whiskey with a trembling hand, looking around the room with wide, watery eyes. "I have no idea," I said. My phone buzzed in my clutch, but I ignored it. I looked at my mother again. She was standing near the stage, checking her watch. She caught my eye and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a stage manager knowing the curtain was about to go up. "It is time," my father announced, his voice booming even without the microphone. The music cut out abruptly. The silence that followed was jarring. My stomach dropped. I knew this feeling. It was the feeling of being 6 years old and realizing I had spilled juice on the white carpet 5 minutes before a dinner party. It was the sense of impending doom. My father stepped onto the low stage. He tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. His voice was rich, practiced. He was a lawyer by trade, a manipulator by nature. He knew how to hold a room. "Thank you for gathering here tonight to celebrate a milestone. 30 years. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. 30 years is a long time. He continued. Long enough to see the fruits of one's labor. Long enough to see if an investment yields a return. A few people chuckled nervously. I did not chuckle. I stood near the bar, my hands gripping my clutch so hard my knuckles were white. Investment. That was the word he chose. "Anna," he said, gesturing to me. "Step forward. Please, do not hide in the shadows." I forced my legs to move. I walked toward the center of the room, feeling the eyes of 60 people on me. My friends smiled encouragingly. The strangers my parents had invited watched with blank, analytical expressions. "When Eleanor and I started our journey as parents," my father said, "we knew it would be a challenge. We knew that raising a child is not just about providing a roof and food. It is about molding a character. It is about instilling values, gratitude, honesty, integrity." He looked at me then. His eyes were cold, flat stones. "Tonight is a lesson in gratitude," he said. "For all of us." He stepped back, and my mother took the microphone. She was holding a large manila envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was that? A deed to a house, a savings bond. Those would be normal, generous gifts, but the energy radiating off my mother was not generous. It was toxic. "Anna," she said, her voice trembling with a theatrical emotion that I recognized immediately as fake. "You have always been restless, haven't you?" "Mom, please," I whispered, though I knew the microphone wouldn't pick it up. "Just do a toast." "You have always questioned your place in this family," she went on. Ignoring me, she turned to the crowd. "She has always felt different. She has spent years searching for herself, drifting from job to job, never quite satisfied with the life we provided. She has made comments, subtle little digs, wondering where she gets her artistic temperament, wondering why she doesn't look like us." I froze. I had never said those things. I had a stable job. I looked enough like them brown hair, average height. I had never questioned my biology. I had questioned their love. Yes, but never my DNA. "So," my mother said, lifting the envelope high like a preacher holding a Bible, "we decided to give you the one thing you have always secretly wanted. We decided to free you from the burden of wondering." She tore the seal. The sound of the ripping paper was deafening in the silent room. "We ran a comprehensive DNA analysis," she announced. "We used samples from your last dental visit and our own medical records. We wanted to be sure. We wanted to give you the truth." The room went deadly quiet. Even the bartenders stopped polishing glasses. This was a violation. To steal my DNA. To do this publicly. "And the results," my mother said, pulling out a sheet of paper with a crisp snap, "are definitive." She looked at the paper, then at me, then at the crowd. She paused for effect. A long, cruel pause. "Not a biological match," she read. The words hit me like physical blows. 0% probability of maternity, she read. 0% probability of paternity. She lowered the paper, looking at me with a face that feigned sorrow but screamed triumph. "You are not ours, Anna," she said into the microphone. "We have raised you. We have fed you. We have paid for your education. We have clothed you, but you are not a ward." The silence in the room broke. A murmur rippled through the crowd, shock, confusion, horror. "We thought it was time you knew," my father added, stepping back to the mic. "We have sacrificed for 30 years for a stranger's child. We have endured your moods, your failures, your lack of gratitude, And we did it out of charity, but we cannot live a lie anymore. You have always acted like you deserved more. Well, now you know why you don't." I stood there, paralyzed. The heat rushed up my neck and flooded my face. My ears began to ring, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the gasps of my friends. This wasn't just a reveal. This was an eviction. They weren't just telling me I was adopted. They were telling me I was a fraud. They were framing my entire existence as a theft of their resources. They were telling everyone, my boss, my friends, the city's elite, that I was a charity case who had overstayed her welcome. "It explains so much, doesn't it?" my mother said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still amplified across the room. "The dishonesty, the lack of family resemblance, the coldness, it is in your blood, Anna, whatever blood that is." I looked around the room, desperate for an anchor. I saw Sarah, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. I saw the judge, looking down at his shoes. I saw Arthur Galloway, the business rival, staring at my father with a look of pure confusion, and then I saw her. Standing near the back, by the kitchen swing doors, was a woman I did not know. She was older, perhaps 65. She wore a sensible navy suit that looked expensive but dated, like something from a different era of corporate power. Her hair was steel gray, cut in a sharp bob. She wasn't looking at me with pity. Everyone else was looking at me with pity or judgment, but this woman was looking at my parents. Her expression was one of absolute shock, but it wasn't the shock of the surprise. It was the shock of recognition. She was staring at the paper in my mother's hand, and then at my father's face, and her lips were moving silently. She looked like someone who had just watched a car crash she had predicted 10 years ago. She looked certain. My mother was still talking. "So we hope you can finally find peace, Anna. Now that you know you don't have to try to be like us. You never could be. The cruelty was so precise, so calculated. They had planned this. They had invited specific people to hear it. They wanted to strip me of my name, my history, and my dignity in a single evening. I tried to speak. I wanted to scream, 'You are lying,' or 'Why are you doing this?' But my throat had closed up. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stand there and be their prop for 1 second longer. I turned blindly, knocking into a high-top table. A glass shattered on the floor. I didn't look down. I ran. I pushed past the stunned guests, ignoring Sarah calling my name. I shoved through the double doors at the side of the room, stumbling into the narrow, carpeted hallway that led to the restrooms and the kitchen. My breath was coming in short, jagged gasps. I felt like I was going to throw up. Behind me, the doors swung open again. "Anna, wait." It was Sarah. But before she could reach me, I heard another voice. It was quieter, sharper. It came from the shadows near the coat check. "Excuse me," a woman's voice said. It was the older woman in the navy suit. She was speaking to a young busboy who was carrying a tray of dirty glasses. I froze, pressed against the wall, hidden by the turn of the corridor. "Where did she go?" the woman asked. Her voice wasn't casual. It was urgent. "The girl? Anna. Where's the side exit?" Down the hall. Ma'am?" the busboy stammered. "I need to speak to her," the woman said, and the intensity in her tone sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with my parents. "I need to speak to her before they get to her again." "Who are you?" the busboy asked. There was a pause. "I am the one who remembers the paperwork," she said. I didn't wait to hear more. Panic, irrational and feral, took over. I pushed off the wall and sprinted toward the ladies' room, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and terrified. I was not their daughter. But looking at the reflection, I realized that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was that the woman in the hallway knew something my parents didn't expect, and for the first time in 30 years, I realized that my parents might not be the ones writing the script anymore. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, and waited for the knock on the door. 1 minute passed, then 2, then a soft, deliberate rap on the wood. Not Sarah's frantic pounding. This was precise, controlled. "Anna!" The voice came through the door. It was the woman. "Open the door. You need to see what I have in my pocket. It proves they are lying about the date." "Go away," I choked out. "They are lying about the date." "Anna," the woman insisted, her voice low and pressed against the crack of the door. "And if they are lying about the date, they are lying about why they did it." I stopped breathing. "Who are you?" I whispered. "My name is Margaret," she said. "And I used to work in archives. Open the door. Child, we do not have much time before your father realizes I am here." I stood up. My legs felt like water, but my mind was sharpening. The humiliation was still burning my skin, but a new feeling was rising underneath it. Curiosity and anger. I reached out and turned the lock. Margaret stood there. She looked even more severe up close. She didn't offer a hug. She didn't offer a tissue. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a business card and a folded piece of paper that looked very old. "Dry your eyes," she said. "You are going back out there." "I can't," I said. "You must," she said. "If you hide, they win. If you go back out there and stand tall, you confuse them, and confusion is the only weapon we have right now." She handed me the card. It had no company name, just a name Margaret Vane and a number. "Call me tomorrow," she said. "But tonight, you go back in there, and you watch your father's hands." "His hands. Watch his hands when he sees me talking to you," she said. "Then you will know exactly how scared he is." I looked at the card, then at her. Then I looked back toward the hallway where the music had started up again, a jarring, upbeat tune that felt grotesque given what had just happened. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I straightened my dress. "Okay," I said. Margaret nodded once, grimly. "Good. Now, let's go ruin their party." The bathroom was a sanctuary of cold tile and harsh halogen light, a stark contrast to the dim, amber warmth of the ballroom outside. I stood at the sink, gripping the porcelain rim until my knuckles turned the color of old bone. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, waiting for it to change. I expected to see a stranger looking back at me, someone with different eyes, a different nose, a different history, but it was just me, Anna, the same face I had looked at for 30 years. The wobble I felt in the center of my chest was not about biology. I did not feel a sudden disconnect from my lineage because of a piece of paper my mother had waved around like a carnival prize. I felt the wobble because I had just watched the two people who were supposed to be my anchors in this world turn my existence into a spectacle. They had taken the private, messy, complicated reality of a family and flattened it into a public performance for an audience of 60 people. It was not a revelation. It was a demolition. Margaret stood behind me, her presence in the small room feeling both intrusive and grounding. She had not moved since I unlocked the door. She was watching me in the mirror, her expression unreadable, her hands clasped loosely in front of her navy blazer. "You are hyperventilating," she said. It was not a question. It was an observation, delivered with the dry practicality of a woman who had seen panic before and found it inefficient. "I am not," I said, though my voice was thin and reedy. "I am just processing." "You are wondering if it is true," Margaret said. "You are wondering if you really are a fraud." "I am wondering why they hate me enough to do this," I said, the words slipping out before I could check them. Margaret stepped closer. She reached into her pocket again, tapping the folded paper she had shown me earlier. "That is the wrong question. Anna, hate is messy. Hate is emotional. What happened out there?" She gestured toward the door. "That was not emotional. That was administrative. That was a transaction." I turned to face her, leaning back against the sink, the cold ceramic pressed into my lower back. "Who are you?" "You said you worked in archives. What does that mean?" It means I spent 20 years cleaning up messes for people who could afford to buy new narratives, Margaret said. Her voice was low, devoid of the theatricality my parents loved. I worked for a contractor that handled records cleanup for private medical firms. I saw things like this. She nodded toward the ballroom. I saw families who needed a specific truth for a specific legal filing, and I saw the paperwork that was generated to support it. She took a step closer, lowering her voice further. That document your mother read from, did you see the logo at the top? I shook my head. I couldn't see anything. I was too busy trying not to vomit. It was from a lab called Veritas Gentech, Margaret said. She said the name with a distinct distaste, like she was tasting spoiled milk. It is a pop-up lab. They cater to a very specific clientele, people involved in high-stakes divorces, inheritance disputes, custody battles where one side needs leverage fast. They are known for what we used to call private client shortcuts. Shortcuts, I asked. You mean they fake results? I mean they prioritize the client's requested outcome over the scientific rigor of the sample, Margaret said. The formatting of that report. The lack of a barcode on the header, the font used for the probability index. It is a template. Anna, it is a standard intimidation template. I have seen that exact layout used to disinherit a nephew in a probate case in 1998. It is easy to fake if you know who to pay. The information hit me like a splash of ice water. It didn't solve the problem my parents had still humiliated me, but it shifted the ground beneath my feet. It took the weapon out of their hands and placed it, however heavily, into mine. It wasn't a divine decree. It was a forgery. Why, I asked, why would they fake it? That, Margaret said, is what you need to find out, but you won't find out hiding in here. She was right. Hiding was an admission of guilt. Hiding was accepting their narrative. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of industrial lavender soap. I turned back to the mirror. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I fixed a stray lock of hair. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, using the motion to steady my hand. Okay, I said to the reflection. Let's go. Margaret nodded. She didn't smile. She just opened the door. Walking back into the party was like walking into a wake where the corpse had suddenly sat up and asked for a drink. The air was thick with tension. As I stepped through the double doors, the low murmur of conversation stopped abruptly, then started up again in a rush of forced normalcy. My parents were standing near the bar, holding court. They did not look like parents who had just delivered devastating news. They looked like generals who had just won a decisive battle. My father was holding a scotch, his other hand resting on the shoulder of a man from the city council. My mother was nodding solemnly at a woman from the historical society, her face arranged in a mask of tragic bravery. They weren't mourning the loss of their biological connection to me. They were celebrating the public severing of it. She is back, someone whispered. I kept my head high. I walked straight to the bar, just 10 feet away from my parents, and ordered a sparkling water. I needed a clear head. My father turned. He saw me, for a split second. His eyes widened. He hadn't expected me to return. He expected me to run home and cry. He expected me to vanish. But the surprise was quickly replaced by a look of smug pity. Anna, he said, his voice loud enough to carry. You are still here. That is, brave. I am not going anywhere, Dad, I said. I kept my voice even. It is my birthday party. I paid the deposit on the venue. My mother sighed, a long, suffering sound. Oh, Anna, always thinking about the money. We are just trying to help you understand who you are. We did our duty today. It was hard, but it was necessary. Duty, I repeated. We couldn't let you go on living a lie, she said, looking around at the guests, seeking their approval. We raised you, we loved you, but the truth is the truth, and we have sacrificed so much for a child that, well, we just wanted everything out in the open. She was scanning the room as she spoke, making eye contact with specific people. It was a performance. She wasn't seeking truth. She was seeking witnesses. She wanted these people, the judge, the councilman, the board members, to testify later that she had been benevolent and honest. Actually, a voice spoke up from the circle of listeners. It was Dr. Evans, a cardiologist who had been a friend of the family for years. He was holding his glasses in his hand, looking troubled. "Richard, Doctor," Evans said, addressing my father. I was looking at the folder Eleanor put down on the table. "The lab report." My father stiffened. "Yes, what about it?" "I don't recognize the lab." "Doctor," Evans said quietly, "Veritas Gentech. I have been in practice for 40 years. I have never heard of a genetic testing facility by that name operating in this state. Usually, for a legal paternity test, you would use a certified forensic lab. This looks like, well, it looks like a direct-to-consumer printout." The room went silent again. This was the crack in the glass. My father's face turned a shade of red that clashed with the brick walls. He stepped forward, invading Dr. Evans's personal space. "It is a specialized firm, Bob," my father snapped. The charm was gone instantly, replaced by the bullying tone I knew so well. "High-level privacy, very expensive. I wouldn't expect a general practitioner to know every boutique forensic firm in the country. I am a cardiologist. Richard, not a GP. Doctor," Evans said, his voice cooling. "And I was just asking." "Well, don't," my father spat. "It is a family matter. We shared it because we value honesty. If you want to question my integrity, you can do it outside." The awkwardness in the room spiked. It felt less like a party and more like a courtroom where the judge had lost control. My father had overplayed his hand. He was defensive. Margaret was right. Sarah appeared at my side, hooking her arm through mine. She was trembling with rage. "Anna, let's go," she whispered. "Let's get out of here. We can go to that diner on 4th Street. We can get milkshakes. Please, I can't watch them do this to you." I looked at Sarah. I loved her for wanting to protect me, but leaving now would be a surrender. "No," I said. "You go if you want. Sarah, I am staying." "Why?" she hissed. "They are monsters." "Because I need to see who they talk to," I said. I pulled away gently and moved to a high-top table in the shadows near the kitchen door. I watched. The party began to dissolve. The casual guests, the ones who were just friends or co-workers, drifted away, murmuring apologies to me as they left. They were uncomfortable. They knew something was wrong. But the important guests, the ones my parents had positioned at the front, stayed. I watched my mother corner Mrs. Calloway, the chairwoman of the chaotic but wealthy philanthropic board my parents had been trying to get on for years. My mother was whispering, touching Mrs. Calloway's arm, gesturing vaguely in my direction with a look of sorrow. Mrs. Calloway was nodding, looking sympathetic. I watched my father pull Mr. Henderson, a senior partner at the city's largest financial trust, into a quiet conversation near the coat check. My father was talking fast, using his hands to emphasize points. He wasn't talking about DNA. He was talking about business. I could tell by the way he squared his shoulders. Margaret was leaving. I saw her walking toward the exit, her trench coat buttoned up to her chin. She paused as she passed my table. She didn't stop, but she slowed down just enough to slide a small, cream-colored card onto the table surface next to my water glass. "Call me tomorrow," she murmured, without looking at me. "Before noon." Then she was gone. She walked right past my parents. My father looked at her, his eyes sliding over her navy coat without a flicker of recognition. He didn't know who she was. That felt like a victory. They had invited a stranger to pad the room, and that stranger was the only one who saw through them. By 11 o'clock, the venue was almost empty. The staff was clearing glasses. The music had stopped. I was sitting on a velvet bench near the back, my shoes off, watching the remnants of my birthday. My parents were in the small manager's office off the main hall. They thought they were alone. They thought I had left with Sarah hours ago. The door to the office was cracked open a few inches. I stood up and walked silently across the polished concrete floor. I stood in the shadow of a potted palm, straining to hear. "You were too aggressive with Evans," my mother's voice hissed. It was a harsh, serpentine sound. "He suspects something." "He is a fool," my father's voice replied. "He won't do anything. He doesn't have standing." "We need to make sure the narrative holds until Tuesday," my mother said. "Just until the meeting. If she is there, if she speaks." "She won't be there," my father said. "She is broken. Did you see her face? She is crushed. She isn't going to show up to a trust meeting when she thinks she has no claim to the name." "I don't know," my mother said. She came back into the room. "Richard, that was unexpected. She has that stubborn streak." "It doesn't matter," my father said. "We have the signature on the renunciation ready. We just needed the public cause. Now we have it. Instability, identity crisis. We can frame any protest she makes as a mental breakdown over the adoption news." "What about the timing?" my mother asked. "If the audit happens before—" "Stop it," my father snapped. "The timing is perfect. We announce the separation of assets based on the biological finding. It protects the core fund. It keeps her away from the legacy clause. It is done. Eleanor—" I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Trust meeting, separation of assets, legacy clause. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about who gave birth to me. It was about money, and it was about a deadline. Tuesday. I could have walked away then. I had the information. I had Margaret's card. But the anger that had been simmering in my gut all night suddenly boiled over. I couldn't let them leave thinking they had won. I pushed the office door open. My parents spun around. My mother dropped her phone. My father's face went pale, then instantly hardened into a mask of annoyance. "Anna," he said, "we thought you had the decency to go home." "I am sure you did," I said. I walked into the small room. It smelled of stale coffee and their expensive perfume. "I heard you." "You shouldn't eavesdrop," my mother said. Recovering her composure, she smoothed her silver dress. "It is unbecoming, but I suppose we shouldn't expect better, given the circumstances." "Cut the act," I said. My voice was steady, surprisingly strong. "I heard you talking about the trust meeting. I heard you talking about Tuesday. This whole show, the party, the DNA test, the public shaming it is a strategy. What are you trying to hide?" My mother let out a cold, incredulous laugh. "Hide? We are not hiding anything. Anna, we are revealing. We revealed that you are not our daughter. We revealed that we have been carrying you for 30 years. "Why now?" I asked. "Why on my 30th birthday? Why in front of the whole city?" "Because you needed to be put in your place," my mother said, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You have been getting ideas, walking around like you earned your position, embarrassing the family with your mediocrity. We needed to make it clear where you stand before you embarrassed us further." "It is about the money, isn't it?" I asked. My father stepped forward. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, and he used his size to intimidate. He loomed over me. "You listen to me," he said. His voice was a low growl. "You are ungrateful. We gave you a life you never would have had, and now you want to question our motives. I am asking why you staged a play instead of having a conversation," I said. "If you push this," my father said, leaning down so his face was inches from mine, "if you try to fight us publicly, if you try to show up at any meetings, we will tell everyone the truth." "You already told everyone I'm adopted," I said. "What else is there?" "We will tell them why you were adopted," he lied. I could see the lie in his eyes, but the threat was heavy. "We will tell them about your biological parents. We will tell them things that will make you unhireable in this city. We will cut you off from every connection, every referral, every safety net we have built for you. You will lose access to anything that was meant for a real daughter." "I am a real daughter," I said, tears finally stinging my eyes. "I was your daughter this morning." "That was a courtesy," my mother said. She turned away, picking up her purse. "A courtesy that has expired. My father straightened up. Go home, Anna. Take the night. Realize that you have a choice. You can walk away quietly and keep your job and your little apartment, or you can fight us and lose everything, including your reputation. He brushed past me, his shoulder checking mine hard enough to make me stumble. My mother followed him, not even looking at me as she walked out the door. I stood alone in the office. The silence of the empty venue pressed in on me. I walked out into the cold night air. The city lights were blurry through my tears. I hailed a cab, my movements robotic. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the venue. The lights were being turned off. One by one, the obsidians. It was fitting, a hard black stone formed by fire. I was numb. But under the numbness, there was clarity. They had made a mistake. They thought they had broken me by taking away my identity. But by stripping away the illusion of their love, they had inadvertently freed me from the obligation to protect them. They had mentioned a date, Tuesday. They had mentioned a motive, money, and they had mentioned a threat. I reached into my purse and touched the sharp corner of the card Margaret had given me. My father was right about one thing. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their adversary. And come Tuesday, they were going to realize that they should have checked the guest list more carefully. The morning sun hit my living room floor with a cheerful, aggressive brightness that felt like a personal insult. I sat on my couch wrapped in a duvet, staring at the small cream-colored card on my coffee table. My head was pounding, a dull, rhythmic throb that had less to do with the 2 glasses of champagne I had consumed and more to do with the emotional concussion of the previous night. Margaret Vane. The name was printed in a serif font, simple and unpretentious, no job title, no company logo, just the name and a number. I had spent the last 8 hours oscillating between numbness and a frantic, clawing panic. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, illuminated by the spotlight, her mouth forming the words, not a biological match. I saw my father's sneer. I saw the pity in the eyes of my friends. But then I remembered the office. The overheard conversation, trust meeting, Tuesday. I reached for my phone. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped somewhere around 4 a.m, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I dialed the number. It rang twice. "This is Margaret," a voice said. It was the same voice from the bathroom dry, crisp, and devoid of morning pleasantries. "It is Anna Ward," I said. "You told me to call." "I did," she replied. I heard the sound of paper rustling in the background. "I assume you are awake and not wallowing. Wallowing is a waste of time, and we do not have much time." "I am not wallowing," I said, pulling the duvet tighter. "I want to know who you are, really." "I told you," she said. "I am a retired archivist. For 30 years. I worked for a company called Med Data Solutions. We were contractors. When hospitals closed, or private practices merged, or insurance firms needed to digitize decades of paper files. They called us, we cleaned the records. We organized them, and sometimes we were asked to lose them." "Lose them?" I asked. "Misplace," she corrected. "Recategorize, mark as damaged by water or fire." It was a niche service for high-value clients. I left that world 5 years ago, but I never forgot the patterns. "And you saw a pattern last night," I said. "I saw a script," Margaret said. "That document your mother waved around. It was a prop. I told you about the lab. Veritas Gentech. They are a ghost operation. They exist to provide paperwork that looks formidable in a boardroom but falls apart in a courtroom. But it wasn't just the lab. Anna, it was the formatting, the phrasing, not a biological match. A legitimate genetic report would use terms like exclusion of probability or allelic mismatch. They used layman's terms meant to shock an audience, not inform a doctor. "So it is fake," I said, feeling a surge of vindication. "It is manufactured," she said. "There is a difference. It might be based on a partial truth, or it might be a complete fabrication. But the document itself is a weapon, not a medical record. I am going to order a real test," I said. "I am going to go to a real lab today. I will get the results and shove them in their faces. Do that, Margaret said. Order the test. Use a reputable service, but do not make the mistake of thinking the results will save you. Why not? Because you are focusing on the what, Margaret said sharply. You are obsessed with proving you are their daughter. You need to focus on the why. Why did they need to prove you weren't? And why did they need to do it last night? In front of Arthur Galloway and the terrifying Mrs. Calloway. They said I was embarrassing them, I said. They said I was entitled. Rich people are embarrassed by their children all the time, Margaret said. They send them to boarding school or buy them a condo in another state. They do not stage a public execution unless the existence of that child poses an immediate legal or financial threat. You need to look at the timeline. Anna, what changed in the last 2 weeks? I thought back. The last few weeks had been a blur of work and party planning. My parents had been distant, but they were always distant. I don't know, I said. Find out, she commanded. I have some old contacts I can reach out to regarding the lab. You do the legwork on the home front. And Anna, yes. Do not let them know you are fighting back yet. Let them think you are crushed. A crushed enemy is ignored. An angry enemy is watched. She hung up. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence of the apartment. Then, I threw the duvet off. I showered. Scrubbing the hairspray and the scent of the venue off my skin, I dressed in jeans and a sweater. Something nondescript. I needed to get into their heads. I couldn't go to their house. Not yet. But I could retrace the steps. I closed my eyes and visualized the kitchen counter from the last time I was there. A week ago. I had stopped by to drop off a box of vintage vinyl records my father wanted for his collection. He hadn't been home. My mother had been in the garden. I remembered standing in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water. The island was usually empty. My mother hated clutter, and there had been a stack of files near the fruit bowl. I had glanced at them idly. Thick, cream-colored paper, legal stock. The letterhead was navy blue. Sterling, Vance Associates. That was their usual firm. Nothing new there. But there had been a calendar on the wall, the big magnetic one my mother used to track their social engagements. I had seen a block of time specifically marked out in red marker, estate reconciliation. At the time, I assumed it was about their summer house. They were always renovating or refinancing. But now, the word reconciliation felt heavy. You reconcile accounts. You reconcile differences. You reconcile a narrative. I grabbed my keys. I needed to go to Sterling. Vance Associates. The law firm was located in a glass tower downtown. The kind of building that smelled of money and floor wax. I had been there a few times as a child, dragged along to sit in the lobby while my father signed papers. I knew the layout. I walked in just before lunch. The receptionist was new. A young woman with impeccable makeup and a headset that looked like it cost more than my car. "Can I help you?" she asked, her smile polite but guarded. "Hi," I said, putting on my best flustered daughter performance. "I am Anna Ward, Richard and Eleanor Ward's daughter. I think my father left his reading glasses here at his last appointment. He is tearing the house apart looking for them. So I told him I was in the area and would check. It was a stupid lie. But stupid lies often worked because people didn't expect them." The receptionist frowned, typing into her computer. Ward, yes, they were just here on Thursday. Thursday, 2 days before the party. Right, I said. Thursday. He thinks he left them in the conference room. I can check the lost and found, she said. She opened a drawer, but I don't recall seeing anything. It was a busy afternoon. We had the notary in for the whole block. The notary? I asked innocently. Oh, was that for the house thing? He mentioned something about the deed. I don't think it was a deed, she said, distracted as she rifled through a box of chargers and sunglasses. The schedule listed it as beneficiary attendance. Usually, that requires all parties to be present. But, oh, here are some tortoiseshell glasses. Are these them? She held up a pair of glasses that were definitely not my father's. Beneficiary attendance, I repeated, my heart skipping a beat. That is weird. He didn't mention I needed to be there. The receptionist froze. She looked at me, then back at her screen. Her training kicked in. She realized she had said too much. I might be mistaken, she said quickly, closing the drawer. I am just the scheduling coordinator. I don't see the actual files. If these aren't the glasses, I am afraid we don't have them. Right, I said, backing away. Thanks anyway. I will tell him to check the car. I walked out of the building, my pulse racing, beneficiary attendance. That meant I was supposed to be there. If they were changing a trust or moving assets that involved me, I should have been in that room. Usually, that requires all parties to be present, she had said, unless one party had been declared unfit, or unless one party had been proven to be not a party at all. I was walking toward the subway station when my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Arthur Galloway. I stared at the name. Arthur was the surprise guest, the man my father had supposedly hated for years, the man who had looked so confused during the speech. I answered, "Hello? Anna." His voice was rough, like he had been smoking a cigar. "It is Arthur Galloway. I got your number from the alumni directory. I hope you don't mind." "I am a little busy, Arthur," I said. "I am not really in the mood for post-game commentary on the party." "I am not calling to comment," he said. "I am calling to apologize. And I think you should meet me. I am at the coffee shop on 3rd and Main, the one with the green awning. I will wait 10 minutes. He hung up. I hesitated. Margaret had told me to investigate. Arthur was a lead. I turned around and walked to the coffee shop. Arthur was sitting in a booth at the back, nursing a black coffee. He looked older than I remembered, his face lined with the kind of stress that comes from managing too much money for too long. When he saw me, he stood up. It was an old-school gesture of respect that felt jarringly out of place. "Anna," he said, "sit down, please." I sat. "Why were you there? Arthur Dad has called you a shark for 20 years. Your father called me a shark because I beat him on the Benson deal in '95, Arthur said, a faint smile touching his lips. But we have maintained let's call it a diplomatic channel. We move in the same circles. When he called me 3 weeks ago, I was surprised too. 3 weeks ago, he invited me to the party, Arthur said. He was insistent. He said he wanted to bury the hatchet. He said it was going to be a significant night for the family legacy, and he wanted the old guard there to witness it. Witness what? I asked. My humiliation. Arthur looked down at his coffee cup. He rotated it slowly on the saucer. He didn't phrase it like that. He told me, "Look, Anna, this is hard to say. He told me you were having problems, mental health problems." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "He said you had become obsessed with the idea that you were adopted." Arthur continued, his voice low. "He said you were having episodes, that you were accusing them of lying to you, demanding tests, acting erratic at work. He said they decided to do the test to give you closure, to help you move on. He asked me to be there as a supportive figure, to support the narrative if things got emotional." "That is a lie," I whispered. "I never asked for a test. I never questioned it. I have been fine. I just got a promotion at work." "I know," Arthur said. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "I saw you last night, Anna. I watched you before the speech. You were talking to your friends. You were laughing. You looked steady. You didn't look like a woman in the middle of a breakdown. And when your mother read that paper, the look on your face wasn't relief. It was devastation." "They set me up," I said. "They planted the story so that if I fought back, everyone would think I was just having another episode." "Exactly," Arthur said. "It is a classic discrediting tactic. If you scream now, you prove them right. If you cry, you prove them right. They have inoculated the entire social circle against believing a word you say." "Why?" I asked him. "Why would they do this to their own daughter?" Arthur leaned forward. "I don't know the specifics, but I know your father. Richard doesn't do anything without a return on investment. If he is burning your reputation, It is because your reputation is costing him something, or blocking him from something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. He didn't hand it to me. He just left it on the table. I can't be seen helping you, he said. Your father has leverage on a project I'm developing. But I have a daughter, Anna, and if I ever did to her what they did to you, I hope someone would shoot me. He stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table, and walked out. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair. I felt violated. It wasn't just the lie about the adoption. It was the theft of my sanity. They were gaslighting the entire city. They were painting a picture of me as a hysterical, unstable woman so that when they made their move, whatever move was happening on Tuesday, no one would listen to my objections. I went home. I ordered the DNA test online from a top-rated lab. I paid for the expedited shipping and the rush processing. It cost $500. I didn't care. But as I clicked confirm, Margaret's voice echoed in my head. Do not wait for the results. I waited anyway. I had to. I needed something solid to hold on to. 3 days passed. They were the longest 3 days of my life. I called in sick to work, telling them I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. The emergency was that my family was trying to erase me. I spent the time digging. I looked up Veritas Gentech. Margaret was right. The website was a template, full of stock photos of scientists holding blue beakers. The address listed was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Nevada. I looked up the laws on trust funds and disinheritance. In our state, a child could be disinherited for any reason, but a beneficiary of an irrevocable trust could not be removed unless they were deceased or proved to be ineligible based on the terms of the trust. Lineage. If the trust said issue of the body or biological descendants, and I was proven to be neither, I was out. On the third afternoon, the email arrived. Subject, your DNA. Analysis results are ready. I sat at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking again. I clicked the link. I entered the password. The report opened. It was a PDF. It was colorful, professional, and dense with data. I scrolled past the ethnicity estimates, mostly Northern European. Nothing surprising, and down to the section on close matches. I expected to see no matches found, or maybe a second cousin I didn't know. Instead, I saw a red flag icon. Analysis inconclusive regarding parent/child relationship. I frowned. I read the detailed notes. Sample indicates high centimorgan sharing with reference samples provided assumed parents, but lacks required markers for direct maternity/paternity. Profile suggests avuncular relationship or half-sibling relationship, or potentially chimerism anomalies. Further testing required. I stared at the screen. It didn't say 0%. It said high sharing. Avuncular, I whispered. That meant uncle or aunt. My brain tried to do the math. Was my father actually my uncle? Was my mother my aunt? It wasn't the clean, you are adopted break my parents had claimed. It was messy. It was a biological tangle. If I was their niece, why lie and say I was a stranger? Why the drama of not a match? My phone rang. It was Margaret. Meet me, she said. The arboretum, the bench by the koi pond. Now. I didn't argue. I grabbed my coat and ran. The arboretum was quiet, the winter trees standing like skeletons against the gray sky. Margaret was sitting on a stone bench, feeding the fish with small, jerky movements. She looked tired. Her navy coat was buttoned tight. I got the results, I said. Sitting down next to her, I was breathless. It is weird. Margaret, it says there is a relation, but it is not parent-child. It says maybe aunt or uncle. It is not what they said. Margaret stopped feeding the fish. She wiped her hands on a handkerchief. It never is, she said softly. The lie is always simpler than the truth. The lie is clean. The truth is a knot. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something behind her steel-rimmed glasses that looked like fear, or maybe shame. I need to tell you about St. Jude's, she said. St. Jude's? It was a private hospital on the west side. Margaret said. It closed 15 years ago. It was absorbed by the conglomerate that owns City General now. But 30 years ago, it was the place where the wealthy went to have their babies. It was discreet. It was luxurious. And it was where you were born. How do you know where I was born? I asked. I never told you. Because I cleaned the records, Margaret said. 20 years ago, when the hospital was shutting down, my firm was hired to archive the patient files. We were told to flag any files with irregularities, discrepancies between the birth logs and the discharge papers, timestamps that didn't match, nurses' notes that had been redacted. She took a deep breath, the cold air misting in front of her face. There was a batch of records from 1996, she said. Your birth year. There were 5 files in that batch that were flagged. They were pulled. We were told to correct them. Correct them how? We were given new pages, Margaret said. Her voice was flat, mechanical. We were told to swap the original birth certificates and the nurse logs for new ones that had been prepared by the hospital's legal team. The new ones had different times, different attending physicians, and in 2 cases, different parents listed on the intake forms. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. And you did it. I had a mortgage, Margaret said, looking at the koi pond. I had 2 kids in college. I didn't ask questions. I was an archivist, not a detective. I swapped the pages. I shredded the originals. You shredded my birth record, I asked, my voice rising. I was supposed to, Margaret said. She turned to face me. But there was one file I couldn't shred, because I knew the name, Ward. Your father was already making headlines back then. I knew who he was, and I saw the name on the original log. The name of the mother. Who? I demanded. Who was it? It wasn't Eleanor, Margaret said. But it wasn't a stranger, either. It was a name it connected to the hospital board itself. It was messy. Anna? It looked like a surrogate situation gone wrong, or a hidden pregnancy within a prominent family. I didn't shred it. I couldn't. You have it. I grabbed her arm. Do you have it? No, she said, shaking her head. I don't have the paper. I was too scared to keep it in my house. I left it in the box, but I didn't mark it for destruction. I marked it for deep storage. It went to the long-term facility in Jersey. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why help me? Margaret looked at me, and her eyes were wet. Because when I saw your mother on that stage, holding that fake report, I realized the correction I did 20 years ago wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. They are trying to bury you, Anna, and I helped dig the hole. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notepad. She wrote down a series of numbers. This is the file reference number, she said, tearing off the page and handing it to me. And this is the request code for the Department of Vital Statistics. You need to request your original, unamended birth documentation, not the certificate they gave you, the long-form hospital intake record. They will deny it, I said, looking at the numbers. Of course they will, Margaret said. They will say it is sealed. They will say it is lost. But you have the reference number now. That proves it exists. And once you have the denial in writing, you can sue for access. Sue? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. My father is a lawyer. He has a firm full of sharks. You don't need a shark, Margaret said, standing up. You need a lever. And if that file is still in the warehouse, it proves that your parents and the hospital committed fraud 30 years ago. That is your lever. She buttoned her coat. Go to the Vital Records office, file the request today, force them to tell you no. Once they deny you, the clock starts ticking for them. Not you. I watched her walk away, a small, gray figure against the winter landscape. She was carrying guilt like a heavy stone. I looked down at the paper in my hand. The numbers were scribbled in blue ink. File 96 Alpha Ward. My parents had tried to erase my identity with a fake DNA test, but they had forgotten that paper trails, like ghosts, are very hard to get rid of completely. I stood up. I was done crying. I was done waiting. I walked out of the park and hailed a cab. Department of Vital Records, I told the driver. I was going to start a war, and I was going to start it with a form filled out in triplicate. The Department of Vital Records was a place designed to kill hope with beige paint and silence. I sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching the request form Margaret had helped me fill out. Number 96, Alpha Ward. The room smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I had been waiting for 2 hours. When my number was finally called, I walked to the window. The clerk, a woman who looked like she had been stamping forms since the Carter administration, took my paperwork without making eye contact. "I need the long-form copy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not the certificate, the intake record." She typed something into her computer. Her keystrokes were slow, deliberate, heavy. Then she stopped. She frowned at the screen. "This record is flagged," she said. "Flagged for what?" "It is amended," she said. "I can't give you the original intake. I can only give you the current amended abstract." "I don't want the abstract," I said, leaning closer to the glass. "I want to see the original signatures. I have the reference number right there. It exists." "It exists in a sealed file," she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were tired and completely indifferent. "State law says amended birth records seal the original unless there is a court order. You are requesting a document that legal doesn't exist anymore." "But why was it amended?" I asked. "Who amended it?" "Administrative update." She read from the screen. "Dated November 14th, 1996. That was 2 weeks after I was born. Can I see who authorized the update?" "No," she said. "Next number." I walked out of the building with a single piece of paper, a generic verification of birth that listed my parents as Richard and Eleanor Ward. But the bottom half the section for hospital vitals, attending physician, and time of birth was oddly, terrifyingly blank. Just white space where the truth should have been. My next stop was the healthcare network that had bought out St. Jude's. It was called OmniHealth now, a corporate giant with a glass headquarters that looked more like a tech firm than a place of healing. I spent 40 minutes in the lobby trying to explain to a receptionist that I needed archives from a closed hospital. She gave me a toll-free number. I called it right there in the lobby. "Thank you for calling OmniHealth," a recorded voice chirped. "For billing, press 1. I navigated the maze of menus until I finally got a human being. "I am looking for records from St. Jude's Hospital, 1996, I said. "One moment," the operator said. I heard clicking. Then, a shift in tone. The operator's voice came back, but it sounded scripted, mechanical. "I am sorry, but due to the acquisition protocols and the age of the requested files, those specific records are currently classified under archived limitations. We cannot access them at the consumer level." "Archived limitations?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "Are they destroyed?" "I cannot confirm the status of the physical files," the voice said. "I can only tell you they are not retrievable through the standard portal. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes, you can tell me." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. It wasn't just a bureaucracy. It was a wall built specifically to keep people like me out. My phone rang almost immediately. I flinched, expecting Margaret, but the screen said Dad. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, my mother called. I stared at the name, Mom. The word felt foreign now, like a word from a language I no longer spoke. I answered, "Anna." Her voice was breathless, pitched high with a frantic sort of concern. "Oh, thank God. We have been so worried. You haven't answered anyone. Sarah called and said you weren't answering your door." "I am fine," I said. "I am busy." "Busy doing what?" she asked. The concern evaporated instantly, replaced by a sharp, probing edge. "You are not doing anything foolish. Are you, like harassment? We heard you went to the law firm." "I was looking for Dad's glasses," I lied. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "The receptionist said you were asking about the schedule. Anna, you need to stop. You are spiraling. You are embarrassing yourself. I am spiraling. I let out a dry laugh. You announced I was a genetic fraud to 60 people on my birthday, and I am the one spiraling. We did that to help you, she cried. To break this delusion you have. And if you keep digging, if you keep bothering the clerks at the city office, yes, we know you were there. Richard has alerts set up. You are going to regret it. You are going to open a door that you cannot close. What door? I asked. What are you so afraid of? We are afraid for you, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. You are not stable, Anna. Everyone sees it. If you continue this crusade, we will have to take steps, medical steps, to ensure you don't hurt yourself. The threat was veiled, but it was there. Conservatorship, involuntary hold. They were setting the stage to have me declared incompetent. Don't call me again, I said, and hung up. I met Margaret an hour later at a diner on the edge of the city. I slid the denial letter from Vital Records across the laminate table. Read the second paragraph, I said. Margaret put on her reading glasses. She scanned the text. Due to specific administrative seals placed under Statute 44B, she looked up. Statute 44B isn't for normal adoptions. It is for witness protection and high-level state wards. What? This isn't a normal seal, Margaret said. Someone anticipated this request. The language here, archived limitations. That is code. It means the file exists, but it has been moved to a restricted tier. It means a lawyer with a very expensive hourly rate made sure no clerk could accidentally open it. My father, I said. Or someone your father answers to, Margaret said. My father answers to no one, I said bitterly. He thinks he is God. Everyone answers to someone, Margaret said, especially when money is involved. Did you find the nurse? I have an address, I said. A Mrs. Gable. She lives in Oakwood. It is about an hour drive. Go, Margaret said. She was the night charge nurse in the maternity ward in 96. If anyone knows what the clerical error was, it is her. The next day, I had to go into the office. I couldn't afford to lose my job. Not when I had a feeling legal fees were in my future. Walking into the marketing firm felt like walking into a high school cafeteria after tripping on stage at the talent show. The silence was loud. I walked to my desk. 2 colleagues stopped talking immediately as I approached. Hey, Anna, one of them said. It was Jessica, a girl I used to grab lunch with. She looked at me with wide, morbidly curious eyes. We heard about the party. Are you okay? I am fine, I said, booting up my computer. It is just crazy, Jessica whispered, leaning in. I heard your parents had to, stage an intervention that must be so hard. Finding out you are adopted like that. It wasn't an intervention, I said, my hands tightening on the mouse. And the test was fake. Jessica pulled back, exchanging a look with the other colleague. A look that said, see, she is in denial, just like they said. Right, Jessica said soothingly. Of course. Well, let us know if you need anything. We are all rooting for you to get better. I stared at the screen. My parents had done it. They had successfully weaponized the party. They had planted the narrative so deep that the truth sounded like a conspiracy theory. If I stood up on a desk right now and shouted that my parents were lying, I would just look like the crazy woman they described. I worked for 4 hours, ignoring the whispers, and then I left. I claimed a migraine. I drove to Oakwood. Mrs. Gable lived in a small, tidy bungalow with a garden full of ceramic gnomes. She was a woman in her 70s, with hands that looked like they had scrubbed a million surfaces and eyes that were sharp and suspicious. I stood on her porch. Mrs. Gable. My name is Anna Ward. She didn't open the screen door. She stood behind the mesh, wiping her hands on an apron. Richard Ward's girl. Yes, I said. But I am not here for him. I am here because I think there was a mistake when I was born. At St. Jude's, November, 1996. Her face changed. It didn't soften. It hardened. She looked left, then right, scanning the empty street. I don't talk about St. Jude's, she said. I signed a paper. My parents told everyone I was adopted last week, I said quickly, desperate to keep her from closing the door. They humiliated me. They said I wasn't theirs, but the records are sealed. Margaret Vane told me to find you. Margaret, Mrs. Gable paused. The archivist. Yes, she said you were there, Mrs. Gable sighed. She undid the latch and pushed the door open a crack. You better come in. Don't stand on the porch. Her living room smelled of cinnamon and dust. She sat in a recliner and pointed to the sofa. You look like her, Mrs. Gable said abruptly. Like who, my mother? No, Mrs. Gable said. Like the woman who screamed. I felt a chill run down my spine. What happened? Mrs. Gable. It was a chaotic night, she said, looking past me at the wall. Full moon. We were understaffed. We had 2 deliveries within 10 minutes of each other, both girls, both around 7 pounds. And one was a standard delivery, she said. The other, complications. The baby needed oxygen. We rushed her to the NICU, but in the hallway, there was a mix-up. A cart got bumped, charts got dropped. It was 5 seconds of confusion. And the babies were switched, I asked. No, she said. Not switched, not by accident, later. When the dust settled, I went to check the bands, the ID bands. One of them was loose. I went to tighten it, and I saw the name. It didn't match the crib card. What did you do? I told the attending, she said. Doctor, Lenson. He went pale. He told me to go take a break. He said he would handle it. When I came back an hour later, the baby was gone, transferred. They said, to a specialist facility. Which baby? I asked. The one with complications. No, Mrs. Gable said. The healthy one. The one that was supposed to belong to the influential family. Was the family the Wards? I asked. Mrs. Gable looked at me directly. No, the Wards were the ones who took the baby. But the Wards weren't the ones who were screaming. The screaming came from the other room. The room with the empty crib. Who was in that room? I whispered. I don't know names, she said, but I know faces, and I saw the man who came in later, surrounded by lawyers. He wasn't crying. He was furious. He looked like a man who had lost an asset, not a child. She leaned forward. They cleared the floor. They sent us all home early. The next day, the records were gone, and we all got bonuses in our paychecks, generous bonuses, and a non-disclosure agreement. So my parents stole a baby. I don't think they stole you, Mrs. Gable said. I think they were given you to hide you. Hide me from what? From the man who looked like he lost an asset, she said. Or maybe to keep you safe from him. I don't know. But I know this, your birth record is blank, because if they wrote the real names down, half the city would burn. I drove back to the city in a daze. The story was starting to take shape, but it was a shape I didn't recognize. I wasn't just adopted. I was hidden. I was a secret that had been brokered in a hallway 30 years ago. But why the DNA test now? Why the sudden need to disown me publicly? I needed to see the money trail. I called Sarah. She worked as a junior analyst at a bank, but her boyfriend, Mike, worked in IT for the Hawthorne Trust, the foundation my parents were obsessed with. I need a favor, I told her. A big one. I need board minutes from the Hawthorne Trust, specifically from the last 3 months. Anna, are you crazy? Sarah hissed. That is corporate espionage. My parents are trying to institutionalize me. Sarah, I said, I need to know why they are suddenly terrified of a trust meeting on Tuesday. Tuesday. Sarah paused. Mike mentioned something about Tuesday, a special vote, something about realignment of beneficiary status. Get me the minutes, I said. Please. 4 hours later, an encrypted file landed in my inbox. I opened it. It was dry. Boring corporate speak. But then I found it. Item 4. Succession alignment. In light of the upcoming maturation of the 1996 legacy grant, the board moves to verify all lineal descendants. Any descendant failing to meet the biological criteria set forth in the original charter will be excluded from the disbursement. Note: reputational safeguards must be enacted to prevent public fallout from any exclusions. The 1996 legacy grant, the year I was born, reputational safeguards, that was the party. That was the humiliation. They had to exclude me publicly to satisfy the board's requirement for biological criteria. But there was something else, a footnote. In the event of a verified claim by a biological descendant previously unknown or hidden, the entirety of the grant reverts to said descendant. Bypassing the secondary trustees. My parents were the secondary trustees. If I was the biological descendant not of the wards, but of whoever set up this grant, I got everything. If I was just the ward's adopted daughter, I got nothing. And if the wards could prove I wasn't theirs, and also prove I wasn't the hidden child, they kept control. They needed me to be a nobody. I had to confront them, not on the phone, in person. I drove to their house. It was a sprawling colonial in the wealthy suburbs, the house I had grown up in, which now felt like a film set where I had played a naive extra for 3 decades. Their cars were in the driveway. It was 7 in the evening. I used my key. They hadn't changed the locks yet. That was arrogant of them. The house was quiet. I could hear the television on in the den. They were watching the news. I didn't go to the den. I went upstairs. I went to my father's study. I knew he kept a safe, but he also kept a pending file in the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk. It was where he put things he intended to deal with by the end of the week. I opened the drawer. It was locked. I grabbed the letter opener from the desktop, a heavy brass thing, and jammed it into the gap. I didn't care about being subtle. I pried. The wood splintered. The lock popped with a snap. I rifled through the papers, bills, invitations, and then a thick packet at the bottom. It wasn't a file. It was a bundle of letters, tied with a rubber band. I pulled one out. It was old. The paper was yellowed. It was dated December 1996. To A. Ward, the arrangement is concluded. The child is safe. The transfer of the asset is complete. Ensure she never knows the name redacted. The risk is too high. And underneath it, a fresh invoice, dated 3 days ago, from Identity Dispute Solutions, LLC, service expedited. Fabrication of genetic mismatch report, cost $50,000. What do you think you are doing? I spun around. My mother was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her usual impeccable mask. Her face was gray, her eyes wide and terrified. She wasn't angry. She looked like she was seeing a ghost. I found it, I said, holding up the invoice. $50,000. That is what it cost to humiliate me. Put that down, she whispered. Anna, please, you don't know what you are holding. I am holding proof, I said. Proof that you bought that DNA test. Proof that I am an asset you took in '96. My father appeared behind her. He filled the doorway. He saw the broken drawer. He saw the papers in my hand. He didn't yell. He moved. He crossed the room in 2 strides. Faster than I thought he could move. He snatched the packet from my hand, his grip bruising my wrist. Ow, I cried, pulling back. You stupid girl, he hissed. He shoved the papers into his jacket pocket. We told you to stop digging. We told you to leave it alone. Why? I screamed. Because you want the money because of the Hawthorne Trust. My father froze. Who told you about the Hawthorne Trust? I know about the legacy grant, I said, backing toward the window. I know that if I am the real descendant, I get it all, and you get nothing. My mother made a sound, a whimper. Richard, she knows. She knows nothing, my father snarled. He turned to me. You think this is about money. You think we went to these lengths just for a payout. The minutes said, The minutes are a formality, he shouted. This isn't about the money. Anna, It is about survival. He took a step toward me. His face twisted in a way I had never seen. It wasn't greed, it was desperation. You found an invoice, he said, his voice shaking. But did you read the letter? Did you see who wrote it? It was redacted, I said. Of course it was, he said, because if that name gets out, the money won't matter. We will be dead, and so will you. The room went silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. What are you talking about? I whispered. You don't understand what they will do if this gets out, my father said. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the window, as if he expected snipers in the trees. We didn't stage that party to steal your inheritance. Anna, we staged it to convince them that you aren't the girl they are looking for. Who is them? I asked. The people who killed your real parents, my mother said softly. My father whipped his head around. Eleanor, shut up. She needs to know. Richard, my mother cried. Tears were streaming down her face. She thinks we hate her. She thinks we are monsters. We are monsters, my father said grimly. We did what we had to do. We took the money to hide her. And now the contract is up, and they are looking again. He looked at me. Get out. Get out of this house. Go to your apartment. Lock the door. And for God's sake, stop asking questions about the Hawthorne Trust. If you show up at that meeting on Tuesday, you are signing your own death warrant. I stood there, trembling. My entire theory, the greed, the disinheritance, the cruelty was shifting again. It wasn't just a scam. It was a cover-up. I looked at the invoice in my father's pocket. Then I looked at my mother, who was weeping into her hands. I don't believe you, I said. I think you are scared, but I don't think you are scared for me. I think you are scared of me. I walked past them. My father reached out, as if to grab me, but he stopped. He let me go. I ran down the stairs and out the front door. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I drove away, watching the house recede in the rearview mirror. The DNA stunt, the humiliation, the not a match. It was a defensive maneuver. They weren't trying to push me out. They were trying to make me invisible. But they had failed. Because by trying to erase me, they had forced me to find the ink. I reached into my pocket when my father had grabbed the packet. He had been fast, but I had been faster. I had managed to slide one single sheet of paper out of the bundle before he snatched it. I pulled it out now, holding it under the passing streetlights. It wasn't a letter. It was a photograph, a Polaroid from 1996. It showed a hospital bed, a woman holding a baby. The woman looked exhausted, but she was smiling, and standing next to her, looking young and terrified, was my father. But the woman wasn't my mother, and written on the white border of the Polaroid, in my father's handwriting, was a name, Elena, and a date, November 14th, 1996. 4:00 a.m. I stared at the photo. My father was there. He knew her. He knew the real mother. I wasn't a stranger they had been saddled with. I was a secret they had helped create. And Tuesday was coming. I drove 2 hours north to the city of Oakhaven, a place that felt like a deliberate exhale compared to the suffocating tension of my hometown. I had an appointment with Julian Thorne, an attorney Margaret had recommended. He wasn't part of the flashy glass tower world my father inhabited. His office was in a converted brownstone, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. Thorne was a man who looked like he had been carved out of teak hard, weathered, and unshakable. He listened to my story without interrupting, his pen scratching rhythmically against a yellow legal pad. I told him everything: the party, the fake DNA test, the amended birth record, the photo of the woman named Elena, and the threats my parents had leveled at me. When I finished, silence hung in the room for a long moment. "You have a mess," Thorne said finally. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered analysis. "But you also have a pattern." "I have a lie," I said. "My birth record is blank. My parents are paying $50,000 to fake genetic reports. I need to sue them for fraud." Fraud is hard to prove without damages, Thorne said, leaning back. And right now, their defense is that they were protecting you from a painful truth. They will say the $50,000 was for a discreet service to handle a sensitive family matter. As for the amended birth record, he picked up the denial letter I had brought. An amended record isn't proof of a crime, Anna. It is a bureaucratic footprint. People amend records for adoptions, for surrogacy, for name changes. On its own, it is just paper. So I have nothing, I said, feeling the familiar weight of defeat. I didn't say that, Thorne said. I said the record isn't the gun. It is the bullet. We need to find the trigger, and the trigger is almost always money. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. You mentioned a trust, the Hawthorne Trust. My parents are obsessed with it, I said. There is a meeting on Tuesday. Trusts are living creatures, Thorne said. They have immune systems. If you try to attack a trust, it defends itself. But if you trigger a procedural clause, you can freeze it. I am going to request the charter. It is a public document if they have nonprofit status. While I do that, you need to find me a contradiction, not a feeling, a hard, numerical contradiction. Like what? Like a time, Thorne said. You have a photo that says 4 a.m. Your parents claim you were born. When they always said noon, I said. My mother always told the story of how the sun was high in the sky. Find me the hospital log, Thorne said. If the official record says one thing and the internal log says another, that is the wedge we drive into the crack. I spent the next 2 days existing in a state of cold. Robotic efficiency. I went to work. I answered emails. I pretended to be the broken, humiliated daughter everyone thought I was. But on my lunch breaks, I was at the library, using the public terminals to scour the archives Margaret had pointed me toward. I had the reference number Margaret gave me 96 Alpha Ward. I couldn't get the file itself, but I found a workaround. I requested the building safety logs for St. Jude's Hospital for November 14th, 1996. Margaret had tipped me off that while patient files were sealed, facility maintenance records were often left in the General Municipal Archive. It took 6 hours of scrolling through microfiche, and then I found it, a security incident report, 0415 hours, incident in maternity ward B, security called to restrain male subject, patient in room 302 transferred to secure wing, doctor, Lenson attending, room 302. I cross-referenced it with the only other scrap of paper I had, my original baby book, which my mother had kept in the attic, the one with the official stats. Anna Ward, born 12:02 p.m., room 405. The photo I had stolen from my father showed a woman in a bed. In the background of the photo, blurry but legible on the whiteboard on the wall, was a number, 302, and the time on the back of the photo was 4 o'clock. I had been born in room 302 at 4 a.m. My official birth was 8 hours later on a different floor. It was a small discrepancy on paper, but in reality, it was the difference between being the daughter of Richard and Eleanor Ward and being the daughter of the woman in the photo. I met Margaret that evening. We sat in her car parked at the back of a supermarket lot. The rain was drumming on the roof, a relentless gray rhythm. I showed her the security log. Room 302, Margaret whispered. She closed her eyes. I remember room 302. That was the VIP suite, the one they kept empty for donors. Who was the donor? Margaret, I asked. You said you knew the name. I knew the family name, she said, her voice trembling. Vance. Vance, I repeated. As in Sterling, Vance Associates. My father's law firm. The Vances founded the firm, Margaret said. They were the power behind half the city's development in the 90s, old money, serious money, and they were the primary donors to the Hawthorne Trust. She turned to me, her face pale in the dashboard light. I processed boxes for the Vance family, she confessed. Years ago, before I retired, my boss told me they were hygiene sweeps. We were removing duplicate records, but I wasn't just removing duplicates, I was removing connections. Connections to what? To a daughter, Margaret said. There were rumors, Anna, rumors that the eldest Vance son had an affair, that there was a pregnancy that threatened a merger or a marriage. I was told to destroy anything that linked the Vance name to St. Jude's maternity ward in 1996. But you didn't destroy the ward file, I said. Because the ward file was the landing pad, she said. Don't you see the Vances didn't want the baby? The Wards took the baby. It was a transaction. Your father was a junior partner back then. Taking you was his buy-in. It was how he made partner. It was how he got access to the trust. My stomach turned over. I wasn't just a secret. I was a bribe. My parents have used Sterling, Vance Associates, for 30 years, I said. They are using them right now to fight me. They are using the same broom to clean the same mess, Margaret said. But the broom is getting old. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Check your email. Now. I found it. I opened the email on my phone. Sarah had been digging through archived newspapers, searching for anything related to St. Jude's and misidentification. She had found a legal notice in a business gazette from 1998. Notice of settlement. In the matter of St. Jude's Hospital versus sealed parties. The dispute regarding administrative misidentification of intake 96 alpha has been resolved amicably, terms confidential. 96 alpha, I read aloud. That is my file number. They settled, Margaret said. The hospital paid someone off to keep quiet about the mix-up, or maybe the Vances paid the hospital. Or maybe, I said, the pieces clicking together. My parents paid everyone. I went to see them the next morning. I didn't break in this time. I rang the doorbell. I stood on the welcome mat, wearing a coat that was tailored and expensive, my hair pulled back, my face scrubbed of any emotion. My father opened the door. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin gray. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since I pried open his desk drawer. Anna, he said. He didn't invite me in. I know about the Vances, I said. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like a physical effect. He stepped back, and I walked past him into the foyer. My mother was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring at a turned-off television. She looked up when I entered. I know I was born in room 302, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. I know the official record says room 405. I know there was a security incident at 4 a.m. involving a male subject. Was that the father? Or was that the grandfather trying to make the problem go away? My mother whispered. I am not going to stop, I said. I am done screaming. Mom, I am just asking. Was I the Vance baby? Did you take me to secure Dad's partnership? My father walked into the room. He closed the doors behind him. We didn't take you to secure a partnership, he said, his voice raspy. We took you to save your life. That is a very dramatic line, I said. It sounds like something from one of your closing arguments. It is the truth, my mother said, standing up. Her hands were twisting together. Elias Vance. He wasn't a good man. Anna, he was powerful, but he was cruel. When he found out about the pregnancy, about Elena. Who is Elena? I asked. She was a paralegal, my father said. She was 22. She worked at the firm. She and the Vance son. It wasn't a romance. It was a mistake. And when the baby came, the family wanted it gone. They wanted the problem erased. So you erased me, I said. You took me in, changed the records, and pretended I was yours. We gave you a home, my father said. We gave you a name. We protected you from a family that would have tossed you into the system or worse. And in exchange, I said, you got a seat on the Hawthorne Trust Board. You got the prestige. You got the money. We got a stipend, my father said, to cover your expenses. That is all. Then why the DNA test? I asked. If you were protecting me, why humiliate me last week? Why tell the world I am not yours? Because the Vances are looking again, my mother cried. The old man died last month. The estate is being audited. If they find out there is a living heir, a biological grandchild, it triggers a war. They will destroy you to protect the fortune. We had to prove you weren't the heir. We had to make you a non-match, so they would stop looking at you. So you branded me a fraud to save me, I asked. You destroyed my reputation to keep me safe from some boogeyman. We did what we had to do, my father said. You are selfish, Anna. You are digging into things that will ruin innocent people. You will ruin us. You will ruin the firm, and you will put a target on your own back. I don't believe you, I said. I think the only people you are protecting are yourselves. I turned and walked out. They didn't try to stop me. They looked relieved that I had left, as if my absence solved the problem. But they were wrong. I called Julian Thorne from my car. I need you to look at the Hawthorne Trust Charter, I said. Specifically, the clause about disputed lineage. I am looking at it right now. Thorne's voice came over the speaker. It is interesting. Anna, Clause 7C. In the event of a public dispute regarding the legitimacy of a primary beneficiary, the assets designated for said beneficiary shall be frozen pending a third-party audit. However, Thorne read, if the dispute results in a confirmed disqualification prior to the vesting date, the assets are immediately redistributed to the secondary trustees. The vesting date, I said. When is it? It is a 30-year grant, Thorne said. Maturing on the 30th birthday of the youngest potential heir, or, wait, it says here the first Tuesday following the 30th anniversary of the grant activation. That is next Tuesday, I said. That is the meeting. Exactly, Thorne said. If you are the heir, the money vests to you on Tuesday. But if your parents prove you aren't the heir before Tuesday, the money goes to them. They didn't do the DNA test to protect you from the Vances. They did it to disqualify you before the clock ran out. They are stealing it, I said. It is a heist, a 30-year heist. It looks that way, Thorne said. But we have a problem. The DNA test, even if it is from a shady lab, is on the record. They have publicly stated you are not their child. That legally removes you from the Ward line of succession. To claim the Vance line, you would need to prove you are the hidden baby, and without a DNA match to a Vance, you are stuck in limbo. I need a match, I said. You need a miracle, Thorne corrected, or someone on the inside. I hung up. I pulled into a gas station to think. I stared at the pump, the numbers ticking up. Inside, my phone pinged, a text message. From a number I didn't recognize. Meet me at the St. Regis Library. Rare book room. 8:00 p.m. Come alone. I hesitated. My parents had warned me about threats, but curiosity and the desperate need for that miracle pushed me forward. I went to the library. The rare book room was a cavern of silence and leather. Sitting at a long mahogany table, obscured by a stack of reference books, was a man. He was small, bespectacled, and looked like he was made of tweed and nervous energy. I recognized him. He had been at my party. He was the man Sarah had pointed out, the one who looked like he had walked out of a Dickens novel. Miss Ward, he said, not standing up. My name is Marcus Hale. I am the actuary for the Hawthorne Trust. You were at my birthday, I said. Sitting across from him. I was, he said. Your father insisted. He wanted the entire board to witness the revelation. Why are you contacting me? Because I am a man of numbers, Hale said. And the numbers do not add up. He slid a folder across the table. This is the disbursement schedule for next Tuesday, he said. Do you know how much the legacy grant is worth? No, I said. I assume a few million. Hale smiled, a thin, dry expression. The Hawthorne Trust holds the land rights to the downtown commercial district. The 1996 legacy grant was an accumulation vehicle. It has been compounding for 30 years. He tapped the paper. It is worth $400 million. I choked on air. $400 million. Give or take, Hale said. And under the charter, it goes to the verified issue of the founding donor line. That would be the Vances, but the Vances are gone. The son died. The old man died. The line is extinct, or so we thought. Until me, I whispered. Your parents have been the guardians of this fund, Hale said. They have drawn a management fee, but on Tuesday, the fund vests. If there is no heir, the capital dissolves into the general foundation, which is controlled by, guess who? My parents, I said. Correct, Hale said. They become the permanent directors of a $400 million empire. Unless I exist, I said. Unless you exist as Elena's daughter, Hale said. Your father has been terrified of this date for years. He knew that if you ever found out, or if the board ever suspected, he would lose everything. So he created a preemptive strike. He staged the DNA test to sever your link to the wards, making you a legal stranger. He bet that you would be too humiliated to look for the other link. He was almost right, I said. But he made a mistake, Hale said. He invited me, and I saw the way he looked at you. It wasn't disgust, Miss Ward. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. A man does not fear a fraud. He fears the truth. Will you help me? I asked. I cannot help you publicly, Hale said. I have a pension to think of, but I can tell you this. The vote on Tuesday requires a quorum, and it requires the beneficiary roll to be certified at the start of the meeting. If you walk into that room with proof of who you are, they cannot vote to dissolve the fund. I don't have proof, I said. I have a blurry photo and a security log. You have more than that, Hale said. He reached into his briefcase. You have the one thing your father forgot to destroy. He pulled out a small, velvet pouch. Elena was my cousin, Hale said softly. I stared at him. She wasn't just a paralegal, Hale said. She was family. And before she died in that hospital room, minutes after you were born, she gave me this. He opened the pouch. Inside was a silver locket. She wanted you to have it, Hale said. Your father took you before I could get to the room. I have kept it for 30 years, waiting for you to come looking. I didn't know where you were. I didn't know the wards had taken you until I saw you at the party. You have her eyes. I took the locket. My hands were trembling. I opened it. Inside was a tiny coiled lock of hair and a microscopic inscription, for my Anna. Use this to find your way home. It is hair, I whispered. Root attached, Hale said. DNA. Her DNA. And yours? I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. Your parents didn't try to erase you because they hated you, Hale said. They tried to erase you because you are the only thing standing between them and $400 million. You are not a charity case. Anna, you are the bank. I closed my hand around the locket. It felt warm, like a living thing. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, Hale said. Standing up, Tuesday is 3 days away, and your father is a dangerous man when he is cornered. If you are going to do this, you need to be ready to burn their house down. I don't want to burn it down, I said. Standing up to meet his gaze, I felt a cold, hard strength settling into my bones. I want to evict them. I walked out of the library into the night. The city lights glittered around me, the commercial district, the skyscrapers, the streets, the land rights. I looked at the buildings. They weren't just concrete and glass. They were mine. My parents had spent 30 years acting like they were the kings of this city, treating me like a peasant they had graciously allowed to sleep in the stable. But the truth was, they were the squatters, and the landlord was coming to collect. The invitation had arrived on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the edges gilded in gold leaf that likely cost more than my first car. It was an invitation to the Hawthorne Trust Centennial Gala, a black tie event held at the city's most historic hotel. To the casual observer, it was just another society party where the wealthy congratulated themselves for being wealthy. But to me, and to the man standing beside me in a tuxedo that fit him like armor, it was a battlefield. "Are you ready?" Julian Thorne asked. He adjusted his cufflinks. his eyes scanning the lobby of the hotel with the detached precision of a sniper. "I am," I said. I was wearing red. Not the polite, subdued burgundy I usually wore to family functions to blend into the wallpaper, but a sharp, violent crimson. It was a dress designed to be seen. It was a dress designed to announce that I was not dead, I was not crazy, and I was certainly not finished. "Remember the strategy," Julian said as we moved toward the ballroom doors. "We do not scream. We do not make a scene. We let them make the scene. We are just here to clarify a procedural point. The injunction we filed last week froze the assets, but tonight is their attempt to override it by public acclamation. They want the board to sign the release in front of the cameras." "They want a coronation," I said. "Exactly," Julian said. "So let's go kick over the throne." Sarah and Marcus Hale walked a few paces behind us. Sarah looked terrified but determined, clutching her purse like a weapon. Marcus, the tweed-wearing actuary who had given me the locket, looked surprisingly calm. He knew the numbers, and he knew that numbers, unlike parents, never lied. The ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos and shimmering gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume, lilies, and the distinct metallic scent of power. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. Casting a fractured light over the 300 guests, I saw them immediately. My parents stood on a raised platform at the far end of the room, flanked by the massive Hawthorne Trust logo projected onto a velvet curtain. They looked magnificent. My father, Richard, was laughing at something a senator was saying, his head thrown back, his posture radiating the easy confidence of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. My mother, Eleanor, stood beside him in a gown of ice blue, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She looked serene. She looked like the perfect matriarch. They had no idea I was coming. They thought the injunction Julian had filed was just a nuisance, a piece of paper they could charm their way past. They thought I was at home, cowering in my apartment, broken by the shame of my 30th birthday. We moved through the crowd. I felt eyes landing on me. Whispers started, rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in a pond. "Is that her? The daughter I thought she was in a facility. She looks intense." I kept my chin high. I didn't look at the guests. I looked only at the stage. As we neared the front, the music, a string quartet playing Mozart, faded. My father stepped up to the podium. He tapped the microphone. The sound boomed through the hall, silencing the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice rich and warm. "Distinguished guests, friends," he smiled, scanning the room. His eyes passed over the area where I stood, obscured by a tall floral arrangement. He didn't see me. "Tonight is a celebration of legacy," he said. "The Hawthorne Trust was founded on a simple principle that the future belongs to those who protect the past. For 30 years, Eleanor and I have had the honor of stewarding this great responsibility. We have made hard choices. We have made sacrifices." He paused for effect, looking solemn. "We have even had to make painful decisions regarding our own family," he said, his voice dropping to a tone of performative grief. "As many of you know, we recently faced a tragedy with our daughter, Anna. It is a heavy burden to realize that the child you raised is unwell, that she is unable to carry the torch of this legacy." My mother dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. The crowd murmured sympathetically. "But," my father said, his voice strengthening, "the trust is bigger than one person. It is bigger than biology. It is about stewardship. And so, tonight, we ask the board to ratify the final transition of the 1996 grant into the permanent care of the directorship to ensure that the work continues, uninterrupted by instability." He gestured to a table on the stage where a leather-bound book lay open. A pen sat waiting. "I invite the senior board members to join me," he said. This was it, the signature. Once they signed, the $400 million transferred from the restricted trust to the general fund, under his absolute control. "Objection! A voice cut through the air. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement, projected with the courtroom baritone of Julian Thorne. My father froze. He looked down into the crowd. Julian stepped out from behind the flowers. I stepped out with him. The silence that fell over the room was instant and total. It was the silence of a held breath. "Anna," my father said. His smile faltered, then reattached itself, tight and brittle. "I see you have decided to join us. I hope you are feeling better." "I am feeling lucid, Dad," I said. My voice shook slightly, then steadied. "I am feeling very lucid." "This is a private event," my father said, gripping the podium. "Security." "This is a meeting of the Hawthorne Trust beneficiaries," Julian said, holding up a sheaf of papers. "And as the legal counsel for the primary claimant, I am formally requesting a procedural pause on all signatures." "Primary claimant." My mother stepped forward to the microphone, her composure cracking. "Mr. Thorne, this is ridiculous. We have already established publicly that Anna is not a biological relation. She has no claim." "We established that you are not her parents," Julian corrected. "That is true. You are not, but that does not mean she has no claim." Murmurs erupted again. The board members on the stage looked at each other, confused. One of them, a man with white hair, put his pen down. "What is this?" "Richard?" the white-haired man asked. "It is a stunt," my father snapped. "She is trying to embarrass us again. She is unwell. George, look at her. She is delusional." "I have a DNA report," Julian said, lifting a document high. "A certified chain of custody report from a federal lab. It confirms that while Anna Ward is not the daughter of Richard and Eleanor Ward, she is the biological daughter of Elena Corves." The name hung in the air like smoke. My father flinched. It was a small movement, a twitch of his left eye, but under the stage lights, it was visible to everyone. "Elena Corves," Julian continued, "was the niece of Marcus Hale, and more importantly, she was the documented partner of Elias Vance Jr. "Lies," my mother shouted. Her voice was shrill, stripping away the elegance of her gown. "That is hearsay. There is no proof of any child." The Vance line ended. "Did it?" The question came from the back of the room. It was a voice I didn't recognize. It was low, husky, and terrifyingly familiar. Everyone turned. Standing in the open double doors of the ballroom was a woman. She was flanked by two men in dark suits who looked like private security, but not the hotel's security. The woman walked forward. She was wearing a simple black suit. She wore no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back severely, but it was her face that made the air leave my lungs. It was my face. It wasn't a resemblance. It was a mirror. She had the same eyes, the same jawline, the same arch to her brow. She looked older, harder, worn down by a life I didn't know. But she was unmistakably me, or I was her. My mother made a sound like a strangled bird. She grabbed my father's arm, her fingernails digging into his tuxedo jacket. "Who is that?" someone whispered near me. "My God, look at them." The woman stopped 10 feet from me. She looked at me, and her expression was a mix of curiosity and profound sadness. Then she looked up at the stage. "Hello, Richard," the woman said. "Hello, Eleanor." My father's face went white. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He gripped the podium so hard I thought the wood might splinter. "You are dead," he whispered. The microphone caught it. "That is what you told people," the woman said. "That is what you told the Vances. You told them the second baby died. You told them there was only one survivor, and you took her." She gestured to me. "You took the healthy one, the pretty one, and you left the complications behind in the state ward system." "Second baby," I whispered. The woman turned to me. "We are twins. Anna, I am Ava." The room erupted. The board members were standing up, shouting questions. The guests were pulling out phones. Julian Thorne raised his voice over the din. "This is Eva Corvus. We located her 3 days ago, thanks to the security logs from St. Jude's. She has lived her life in foster care, unaware of her heritage, until we matched her DNA to yours. Anna. He turned to the stage. 2 children were born in room 302, Julian said. 2 heirs. Richard and Eleanor Ward took one Anna to use as a placeholder for the trust. They declared the other one dead to simplify the accounting. They split a set of twins to secure a board seat. It is a lie, my father roared. He was sweating now, his hair disheveled. She is an actor. They hired her. Look at her. It is plastic surgery. He was desperate. He was pointing a shaking finger at Eva, then at me. They are conspiring, he shouted. They want the money. They are unstable, both of them. It is a genetic defect. That is why we had to separate them. He stopped. The room went deadly silent. He had just admitted it. That is why we had to separate them. My mother closed her eyes. She let go of his arm and took a step back, isolating him. Richard, she whispered. Stop. No, my father yelled. I will not stop. I built this. I saved this family. We took the girl in. We raised her in luxury. She should be grateful. And you, he pointed at Eva. You were sick. You weren't supposed to make it. It was a mercy. A mercy? Eva asked. Her voice was cold as ice. You erased my existence so you wouldn't have to split the management fee. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a packet of papers. It was old, yellowed, and stained. This is the death certificate you filed for me, she said, holding it up. Signed by Dr. Lenson, cause of death, respiratory failure, dated November 14th, 1996. She dropped the paper on the floor. And this, she said, pulling out a second paper, is my current driver's license. I think the board will find the discrepancy interesting. The white-haired board member on stage walked over to my father. He didn't look angry. He looked disgusted. Get off the stage, Richard, he said quietly. You can't do this, my father sputtered. I am the director. I have the proxy votes. The proxy votes are suspended pending a criminal investigation, Julian Thorne said. We have already contacted the district attorney regarding fraud, forgery, and kidnapping. My father looked around the room. He looked for allies. He looked for the senator, the judges, the friends he had cultivated for 30 years. No one met his eyes. They were all looking at me and Eva. They were looking at the physical proof of his crime standing side by side in the center of the ballroom. My mother broke then. She didn't scream. She just slumped. The elegant posture vanished. She looked suddenly very small and very old. She walked to the edge of the stage, not toward my father, but toward me. Anna, she pleaded. Her voice was thin, caught by the microphone she passed. Please, you have to understand. It was never supposed to be about you. It wasn't personal. We grew to love you, in our own way. You love the asset, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. You love the leverage. You didn't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have left my sister to rot in the system while I took ballet lessons. We were scared, she wept. The Vances, they were powerful. We were just protecting ourselves. No, I said. You were protecting your ambition. I looked at Eva. My sister, a stranger with my face. She was looking at our parents with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating off her skin. It is over, Mom, I said. The show is over. Security guards began to move toward the stage, not to protect my parents, but to escort them. This event is paused, the white-haired board member announced into the microphone. Please, everyone, clear the room. The police are on their way. My father tried to resist. He grabbed the podium, shouting about ungrateful children and conspiracies. But the guards were firm. They took him by the elbows. For the first time in his life, Richard Ward looked powerless. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find himself in a cell. I watched them being led away through the back exit. My mother was sobbing, her head down. My father was still arguing, but no one was listening. The guests began to file out. casting glances at us. They looked terrified. They knew that what had happened tonight would topple more than just the wards. It would expose the lawyers who drafted the fake death certificate, the doctors who signed it, the board members who looked the other way. The room emptied until it was just me, Julian, Sarah, Marcus, and Eva. Eva walked over to me, up close. I could see the differences. A small scar on her chin, lines around her eyes that I didn't have. "Hello, Anna," she said. "Hello, Eva," I said. We didn't hug. It was too soon for that. We just stood there, two halves of a whole that had been broken 30 years ago, trying to understand the gravity of what had just happened. "Did you know," I asked her, "about me?" "Not until 3 days ago," she said. "When your lawyer found me, I thought I was an orphan. I didn't know I had a sister. And I didn't know I was worth $200 million. She looked around the empty ballroom, at the gold leaf and the crystal. "It is a lot of money," she said. "It is," I agreed. "Is it enough to fix it?" she asked. "To fix the 30 years. I looked at the door where my parents had been dragged out. I thought about the birthday party. I thought about the fake DNA test. I thought about the $50,000 they spent to brand me a fraud. "No," I said. "Money doesn't fix time. It just pays for the therapy." Eva cracked a smile. It was a dry, cynical smile, my smile. "I can work with that," she said. We walked out of the hotel together, into the cold night air. The paparazzi had arrived. Flashes popped like lightning, blinding and chaotic. Reporters were shouting questions. "Anna, is it true? Are you the Vance heir? Are your parents going to jail?" I stopped on the steps. The wind bit at my bare arms. I felt Julian step up beside me, a protective presence. I looked at the cameras. I thought about hiding. I thought about running to a car and disappearing. But then I felt Ava's shoulder brush against mine. She wasn't hiding. She was staring down the lens of the nearest camera with a look of absolute defiance. I took a deep breath. My parents had spent my entire life trying to write my story. They had edited me, redacted me, and finally tried to delete me. But the pen was in my hand now. I looked at the crowd of reporters, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel like an imposter. I didn't feel like a fraud. I felt like the author. "My name is Anna Vance," I said to the cameras, testing the sound of it. It felt strange, but heavy, real. "And this is my sister, and we have a lot to say." I took Ava's hand. We walked down the stairs, into the lights, ready to burn the whole corrupt city to the ground and build something new from the ashes. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Humiliate Me at my 30th birthday with DNA results. They didn't expect who was in the crowd. I hope this story kept you on the edge of your seat. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and tell me your country or city. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed Anna's journey of vindication, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And I want to hear from you. Do you think Anna and Eva should forgive their parents? Or should they use the inheritance to ensure Richard and Eleanor never have power again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments in English. Until next time, keep your secrets close and your receipts closer.